When IT and finance align, cybersecurity gets simpler and stronger. But is it about more tools or better processes?
Hi, Andrew. Thanks for taking the time out of your busy day to talk to me today.
Of course.
For everyone who's listening, I've chosen today to speak with Andrew Flamick. He is the CFO at Usherwood. He's been a CFO for a number of years, and I'll let him introduce himself. But I think the important thing to talk about today is making cybersecurity less scary in the finance department and kind of talking about how cybersecurity posture in the CFO and finance realm sounds really scary and sounds very intimidating. But with a few process tweaks and a few things here and there you can do, you can really up your game and keep your department and your company safe. And so, Andrew, I think I would like if you could introduce yourself and then we'll kind of chat about that.
Sure. Yeah. Like you said, I've been in finance for pretty much my entire career. And I've held a ton of different roles here and seen a lot of different things. And I think that, one of the things I've learned over the years is that, you got to start somewhere and you got to start simple. One of the first things a handful of years ago that we stepped into to try to make, business email compromise less possible or phishing and that kind of stuff is just simple things like don't share logins, don't share portals. It's very common in finance to have vendor portals and partner portals and remittance portals and all these different websites that you share. And so the number one thing that we did was stop sharing them. And if you have to share them, at least use a password portal, a password vault with MFA to try to do everything that you can to keep confidential information or bank accounts or any sort of ammunition that could be used against you in terms of a business email compromise incident. So that it doesn't have to be terribly complicated. You can start with something simple.
I think that's super helpful to think about not sharing passwords. I know that's something we talk about. You hear it all the time and you kind of feel, okay, well, of course I'm not going to share my password to my Microsoft email, but some of these vendor accounts, these little things, sometimes that could be easily overlooked. What do you think is maybe a more complicated process that something you've been thinking about that's maybe a little bit more intermediary than that?
Sure. Yeah. People think of cybersecurity and things like that, and they think it has to be AI driven software and something complicated. And really, some of the best practices are just a really good process, right? So one of the things that we do here is we use a multi level approval process for a ton of things that in the finance group, particularly things like bank account transfers, new vendor account creation, making payments requiring multiple layers of approval for payments of different thresholds, and even simple old school tactics like when you get a new vendor set up and you have to ACH funds to them, you have an independent party gather the information and then a third party call and verify the account information with that person. So you end up with kind of a foolproof way that if someone emails you their ACH information, you call them back and have a second person validate that bank info to make sure that you've got the person that they say they are on the other line and you're sending the money where you expect.
So essentially, you're saying to use multi-factor authentication for humans.
In the verbal sense, yeah, in the phone sense.
So maybe going analog on some items can be really helpful in the finance space for verifying payments and things of that matter.
100%. And it's no different than something like an incident response plan. You keep an analog copy for a reason. There's a good reason to keep some analog processes around as well.
I love that. Can you maybe give us an example of something that is a little more technical that maybe your finance department uses or something that you would aspire to use in the future that can help your department security posture?
Yeah, so I think that when it comes to a really technical thing that is it maybe sounds scarier than it actually is having a really good, well tested disaster recovery, backup and disaster recovery process, right? Because the number one business impact that you can have is an impact to your clients, and an impact to your clients means that you can't bill your clients, and without revenue stream, without cash flow, your business can be in trouble or fail, right? So, making sure in conjunction with your IT provider that you've got backup and disaster recovery not only set up, but you understand, is that backup a hot backup that you can immediately spin up in the cloud to continue doing business? What would your downtime be? We regularly back up multiple times a day, offsite and onsite. hot, available, ready to spin up in the cloud, and also test that to make sure that those files work, and that in the case of some sort of a cyber incident or a ransom attack or whatever it might be, that we can still support clients as well as bill those clients, collect those funds, and continue to do business.
I love that because essentially what you're saying is that backup and disaster recovery, a very technical term in the IT space, is not just for IT. And that finance may have one of the more important positions when it comes to that plan because if you can't bill your clients, you have no income, right? And then you have major business interruption losses that can occur from that. Kind of along that same vein with business interruption losses, are there any cybersecurity parallels to cyber insurance that kind of you would think about in this space?
Yeah, and the one thing that we do every year when it comes to cyber, our cyber policy is we really involve multiple stakeholders in the filling out of that application, because getting cyber insurance is the easiest part of having cyber insurance, because there are so many different qualifiers in terms of, if you do have an event, things have to be in place that you said were in place. You have to have MFA. You have to be following the controls that you attested to in that application. So we tend to get everybody in the same room on the same call, members from our IT leadership group, members from our finance leadership group, as well as a representative of our broker, to really go through that application, understand what the spirit of the questions are, and make sure that we're answering them to the fullest that we can, and also taking away action items on how we can better answer those questions in the future, so that if we do have a loss or an incident, we stand the best chance to be covered.
Yeah, I find that's really important that cyber insurance questionnaires are not check the box, and they really are. If you have an incident, they're looking at what you put on there to see, are you doing the things you said you would do? I think that goes for a lot of things in the IT space, right? When it comes to compliance and regulations, sounds really like not super hard to do, right? You get a bunch of people in a room and you do your best to tell the truth. You say, okay, maybe we don't have this thing that we want, but we're working on it and we want to have that for the next year. That's okay, right? Because the world is always evolving and those answers are going to change over time and different things are going to be required over time. Is there anything that I haven't asked you about or anything that you think about in for finance, for payments, anything?
No, I think that, you have to start somewhere. Sometimes the simplest of things make the biggest of impact, and when it gets to a real high level, you're just continuing to evolve and continuing to get better. It really comes down to, you know, understand what the rules and the processes are, follow them because they mean something, not because you're told to, and make sure that you have a really well-oiled system in place so that your network is secure, your processes are secure, and even the old school things like taking credit card payments and sending out a check or an ACH, those are all as equally as important, as leaving your front door open.
Yeah, I like that analogy. Super appreciate you taking the time to think about different things that other people can maybe take from this conversation and also sharing some of the things that you and your team do. I think just sitting down even once a year and thinking about, what are your processes and where can we insert some changes that will make us more secure or to add that human factor of having the analog or the human multi-factor authentication is super helpful.
For sure, and yeah, always looking around, listening, reading the news, and thinking about how that similar situation can impact you. Take every day as a learning experience.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your words of wisdom, Andrew. We appreciate you stopping
Of
by.
course.